Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that being broke is actually really expensive? Think about that for a second. Most people assume that the less money you have, the less you spend. But what if I told you the opposite is actually true? What if the financial system is quietly designed in a way where the less money you have, the more you end up paying for the exact same things just because of your situation? There's a name for this. Some economists call it the poverty premium. Others call it the poor person tax. And once you see it, you genuinely cannot unsee it. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's not about politics. It's about understanding a hidden pattern that affects millions of people every single day, and most of them have no idea it's happening to them. So let's talk about it. Here's the story most of us grow up hearing. Work hard, spend less than you earn, save your money, and you'll be fine. Simple, right? And on the surface, that advice makes sense. But here's the thing nobody tells you. That advice works much better when you already have money than when you don't. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 24, working full-time at a logistics company, bringing home about $2,200 a month after taxes. He's not irresponsible. He doesn't blow money on vacations or designer clothes. He's actually pretty careful with his spending. But somehow, at the end of every month, there's almost nothing left. And when something unexpected happens, a car repair, a medical bill, a broken phone, it completely wrecks him financially. Meanwhile, Daniel earns around $4,500 a month. Daniel doesn't think much about money. He auto-pays his bills, has a credit card he pays off monthly, owns his car outright, and still has money left over at the end of the month without really trying. Here's the question. Is Marcus just bad with money, or is something else going on? Because when you look closely at what Marcus is actually paying for things compared to Daniel, the numbers tell a very uncomfortable story. Let's break this down. Marcus rents a small apartment. He doesn't have renter's insurance because when he looked it up, it felt like an unnecessary expense. $20 a month seemed pointless when he's already stretched thin. Daniel has renter's insurance. It costs him about the same, but it barely registers in his budget. Now one day, there's a small flood in Marcus's building. His laptop, his phone charger, some clothes, all damaged. He has to replace his laptop out of pocket. That's $400 gone, a real setback. Daniel files a claim, pays his deductible, moves on with his week. The person who couldn't afford the $20 monthly expense ended up paying $400 in one blow. That's the poor person tax in action. Skipping small protective expenses because money is tight ends up costing far more when reality hits. Now let's talk about something that affects almost everything in your financial life, your credit score. Marcus has a thin credit history. He missed a payment once during a rough month and his score dropped. Now his car insurance, yes, car insurance, costs him more than it costs Daniel. His interest rate on his credit card is 24%. Daniel's is 14%. Marcus is renting a used car because he couldn't put down a deposit on financing. The financing he eventually got charges him more per month than Daniel pays for a newer car. This is wild when you think about it. The financial system essentially says if you've struggled with money in the past, you'll pay more for money in the future. Loans, insurance, financing, almost all of it gets more expensive when you're seen as a financial risk. The people who need cheaper credit the most are the ones who get charged the most for it. Here's one that sounds small but adds up massively over time. When Daniel goes grocery shopping, he buys in bulk. He grabs the large bottle of olive oil, the family pack of chicken, the big bag of rice. Per unit, he's paying significantly less than Marcus, who buys smaller quantities because that's what fits his budget right now. Marcus is paying more per ounce, per unit, per meal, not because he wants to, but because he literally cannot afford to pay $100 up front to save $30 over the next 2 months. He doesn't have that $100 available without cutting something. This is called the poverty premium on consumption. Wealthy people can afford to spend more today to save more tomorrow. People with less money are often forced into less efficient purchases because they're working with whatever cash is available right now. Marcus doesn't have the minimum balance required for a cheap checking account, so he pays a monthly maintenance fee of $12. That's $144 a year just to have a bank account. If his balance ever dips below a certain level, which happens, he gets hit with a low balance fee. If a payment goes through when funds are tight, overdraft fees kick in. Daniel pays zero in bank fees. His balance never drops low enough to trigger anything. The person who can least afford to lose money is losing money every single month just for the privilege of having access to the banking system.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological standpoint. There's a concept called scarcity mindset, and it was studied in depth by behavioral economists Sindil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir. What they found was fascinating. When people are focused on not having enough, whether that's money, time, or food, their mental bandwidth gets consumed by that scarcity. Their ability to think long-term, plan ahead, and make optimal decisions actually decreases. Not because they're less intelligent, but because managing daily financial stress takes up genuine cognitive space. So Marcus isn't just paying more money, he's also spending more mental energy just to survive financially. He's constantly doing mental math, juggling which bill gets paid when, calculating whether a purchase is safe to make. That cognitive load is exhausting, and that exhaustion sometimes leads to decisions that look irrational from the outside, but make complete sense when you're inside the pressure. The expensive bottle of soda at the gas station, the fast food because cooking felt impossible today, the small splurge because you needed one moment of feeling okay. These aren't stupidity, they're a psychological response to chronic financial stress. This is also why the advice, just stop buying coffee and you'll be rich, misses the point completely. The problem isn't the coffee. The problem is a system of compounding disadvantages that makes every financial step harder for people who start with less. There's another layer here too. The poor person tax is largely invisible. Most people experiencing it don't see it as a systemic pattern. They see it as personal failure. Why am I always broke? Why can't I ever get ahead? What's wrong with me? And that self-blame narrative keeps people stuck in the same cycles because they're trying to fix themselves when the real issue is the invisible financial penalties stacking up around them. Understanding this isn't about making excuses. It's about diagnosing the actual problem correctly so you can actually solve it. So, what do you actually do with this? The first thing is awareness. Once you understand the poor person tax, you start asking a different question. You stop asking, how do I cut my spending? And start asking, which of my current costs are poverty premiums that I can eliminate as I build more stability? Here's what that looks like practically. Credit is the foundation. If your credit score is low or thin, make building it a priority above almost everything else. A better credit score is not just a vanity number. It directly lowers your cost of living. Cheaper insurance, better loan rates, more financing options. One of the fastest ways to build credit with little money is a secured credit card, where you deposit a small amount as collateral and use it for one recurring bill, then pay it off in full every month. You're borrowing your own money, essentially, but it builds your history. Emergency fund before everything else. Even a small one, even $500. The entire purpose of an emergency fund isn't to make you rich, it's to absorb shocks without taking on expensive debt or derailing your whole financial plan. Without it, every unexpected expense becomes a financial emergency that costs you more than the original expense. Hunt for fee-free banking. There are plenty of online banks and credit unions that have no minimum balance requirements and no monthly fees. This is a simple switch that stops the bleeding immediately for many people. Buy in bulk strategically. You don't have to bulk buy everything at once. Start with one category, rice, pasta, toiletries, where you know the unit cost is significantly cheaper in larger quantities. This requires some upfront cash, but builds into real savings over time. Understand insurance differently. Stop seeing insurance as an expense and start seeing it as a financial buffer. Renter's insurance, a small health plan, even a basic emergency phone plan. These are tools that prevent large, unexpected costs from destroying your momentum. And perhaps most importantly, talk about money.
The poor person tax stays invisible partly because money is such a taboo topic. When people share information about fees, rates, better products, and smarter options, the knowledge spreads. Most people have no idea how much they're overpaying simply because nobody told them there was a better option. Here's the thought I want to leave you with. The wealth gap in the world isn't just about income. It's not just about who earns more per hour. It's about the compounding advantages that come with having money and the compounding disadvantages that come with not having it. Rich people pay less for money. They pay less to protect what they have. They can afford to buy cheaper in the long run. They're not charged fees just for existing in the financial system. And none of this is to say wealth is impossible to build if you're starting from less. Millions of people do it every generation. But the first step is seeing the game clearly, understanding that you're not just fighting for the next dollar, you're fighting against a quiet tax that most people never even notice. Marcus isn't bad with money. He's playing a harder version of the same game. The question is, once you know that, what do you do about it? Because knowing is where it starts.